Warning: this episode discusses generational identity, culture shifts, masculinity, independence, and societal change. We're not attacking individuals. We're examining patterns. If you're easily offended by cultural analysis or uncomfortable with generational self-reflection, this might not be your episode. We challenge ideas here, not people. And sometimes that means uncomfortable honesty.
We are the last generation that remembers life before the internet, and the first generation forced to survive after it. We didn't grow up with algorithms shaping our thoughts or strangers rating our existence. We grew up with scraped knees, burned CDs, cassette tapes unraveling in a dashboard player, and parents who said, "Be home before dark," and meant it. There were no tracking apps, no constant supervision, no curated childhood, just space, silence, risk, and responsibility. We were latchkey kids. We let ourselves in. We made our own snacks. We figured out homework without Google. If something broke, you fixed it. If someone messed with you, you handled it. And if you failed, you got back up without posting about it. We learned independence before it became a buzzword. We watched the Berlin Wall fall on boxy televisions. We saw 9/11 live. We deployed. We buried friends. We watched the country change, not through hashtags, but through history. We didn't inherit peace and prosperity without cost. We lived the transition from analog to digital, from privacy to permanent record, from freedom to friction. Now we're in our 40s and 50s. We're raising kids in a world we barely recognize. We're managing teams that grew up online. We're caring for aging parents while trying to keep our own family steady. We're paying the taxes, carrying the mortgages, sitting in the middle of political extremes that don't quite feel like home. And culturally, we're invisible. Too young to be the establishment, too old to be the future. Millennials get analyzed. Gen Z gets headlines. Boomers get blamed. Gen X, we get overlooked. But here's the thing. When systems wobble, when culture shifts, when institutions crack, it's Gen X quietly holding the beams up. The managers, the small business owners, the first responders, the veterans, the single moms, the dads coaching Little League after working 10 hours. We weren't raised soft. We weren't raised fragile. We weren't raised curated, we were raised alone. And maybe that's exactly why we're built different. Tonight, we're not complaining, we're reflecting. Is Gen X the forgotten backbone of America? Or are we just the generation that learned to carry weight without asking for applause? All right, let's bring in the crew. Because if we're talking about Gen X being built different, we need every angle on this table tonight. First up, Brian, our resident traditionalist. The guy who thinks common sense should still be common, discipline isn't oppression, and maybe, just maybe, we lost something when participation trophies became mandatory. If there's a generational backbone argument to be made, Brian's already flexing it. Rachel is here, steady as always, independent, analytical, not buying nostalgia without data, and not buying cultural panic without context. She's going to ask whether we're romanticizing the past, or accurately diagnosing the present. Daniel's in the building too. He sees patterns in everything. Media shifts, generational psychology, cultural engineering. If there's a thread connecting MTV, the rise of tech, institutional distrust, and where we are now, he's probably already pinned it to the board. And Skylar is with us, bringing that progressive lens, generational empathy, and the reminder that culture evolves for reasons. She'll challenge whether built different means resilient or emotionally unavailable. And me, I'm right in the middle of it. Grew up analog, deployed digital, raising kids in an algorithmic world, watching the country shift in real time. Tonight isn't about flexing, it's about asking whether Gen X is quietly holding things together or quietly burning out. All right, let's dig into this, because when we say Gen X is built different, that can mean a lot of things. It can mean tougher. It can mean more independent. It can mean emotionally reserved. It can mean self-reliant to a fault. We were the kids who figured it out. We weren't constantly supervised. We weren't constantly validated. We weren't constantly protected from consequences. If something went sideways, you adjusted. If you messed up, you owned it. If you got knocked down, nobody built a committee around your feelings. You just got back up. But here's the real question. Did that make us resilient? Or did it just make us quiet about our struggles? Because now we're the ones running businesses. We're the ones leading teams. We're the ones raising teenagers in a world we barely recognize. We're the ones caring for aging parents while trying to stay afloat financially in an economy that doesn't look anything like the one we entered. And yet culturally, it feels like we're stuck between generations shouting at each other, Boomers get blamed, millennials get analyzed, Gen Z gets spotlighted, Gen X just keeps working. So tonight I want to ask a deeper question. Are we actually the backbone holding this country steady? Or are we just the middle child generation that learned not to complain? Rachel, let me start with you. When people say Gen X is built different, is that strength or is that just survival?
I think it's both. I think Gen X absolutely developed resilience, but we need to be honest about how and why. We grew up in a time when independence wasn't optional. Dual-income households were becoming the norm, divorce rates were climbing, and figure it out was often the parenting strategy. That forced adaptability. It forced self-regulation. It forced problem-solving without supervision. And those are real strengths. But resilience that develops out of necessity isn't always the same thing as emotional health. We didn't grow up talking about anxiety. We didn't grow up with language for burnout. We didn't grow up being told it was okay to say, "I'm not okay." So yes, we're capable. Yes, we're steady. Yes, we don't collapse under pressure easily. But sometimes that's because we learned early that collapsing wasn't an option. And I think what makes Gen X unique isn't just toughness, it's perspective. We remember analog life. We remember boredom. We remember privacy. We also built the digital infrastructure that younger generations now live inside. We were early adopters, but not natives. That gives us context. We can see both worlds. The question isn't whether we're built different. We are. The question is whether that difference is being used wisely. Are we modeling balanced resilience for our kids, or are we just teaching them to suppress? Are we leading workplaces with strength and empathy, or just expecting everyone to tough it out like we did? Gen X may be the backbone, but even a backbone needs flexibility. Too rigid, and it snaps. Too soft, and it collapses. I think our real test right now is whether we can blend the independence we learned with the emotional awareness we didn't.
That's a fair point, and I'll be honest, I think that's where the tension lives. Because when I hear emotional awareness, part of me agrees, and part of me wonders if we're overcorrecting as a culture. I don't think Gen X suppressed everything because we were broken. I think we compartmentalized because we had to. When you're a kid coming home to an empty house, you don't have the luxury of spiraling. You make the sandwich, you finish the homework, you solve the problem. That becomes wiring, that becomes instinct. And that wiring has carried a lot of weight in this country for the last 25 years. But Rachel's right about one thing. There's a difference between strength and silence. There's a difference between resilience and emotional shutdown. And maybe that's the balance we're trying to figure out right now while raising kids in a world that feels softer in some ways, but also way more chaotic in others. Because here's what I see. Gen X doesn't panic easily. We don't implode on social media. We don't need constant validation. We're skeptical. We question institutions. We don't automatically trust narratives. That didn't come from comfort. That came from watching systems fail in real time, from recessions to 9/11, to wars, to corporate collapses. So Brian, let me bring you in here. Is this generation actually the backbone holding the line right now? Or are we just the last group that remembers a world without coddling? And did that lack of coddling make us stronger or just harder?
I'm going to say it straight. Yes, we're the backbone. And it's not because we're special snowflakes in reverse. It's because we were the last generation that understood consequences without needing a seminar about them. When we screwed up, there were real outcomes. Not think pieces, not safe spaces, real outcomes. You got grounded, you lost the job, you got cut from the team, and you learned fast. That doesn't make you emotionally stunted. It makes you accountable. And I think that accountability is exactly what's missing in a lot of culture right now. We grew up in a time where effort mattered, results mattered, showing up mattered. You didn't get applause for existing. You earned respect by producing something. That mindset built small businesses, built military units, built first responder culture, built families that survived hard seasons. That's not suppression, that's structure. Now, does that mean Gen X is perfect? No, but we understand delayed gratification. We understand that life isn't fair. We understand that feelings don't override facts. And that perspective matters when you're leading people. It matters when you're voting. It matters when you're raising kids who are growing up in a world that tells them discomfort is trauma and disagreement is violence. And here's the part nobody wants to say. The country feels unstable right now because too many people were raised without friction. Friction builds strength. Resistance builds muscle. We had friction. We had resistance. We weren't curated, we were forged. So yeah, I think Gen X is holding a lot together right now. Quietly, without hashtags, without demanding credit. We're just doing the work because that's what we were taught to do.
All right, I knew you were coming in hot on that one. And look, I don't disagree with the friction part. Friction builds strength. Resistance builds muscle. Anybody who's deployed, run a business through a recession, or raised teenagers knows that comfort doesn't produce capability, pressure does. But here's where I want to slow this down a little bit, because if we frame this as we were forged and everyone else was coddled, we risk sounding like every older generation that ever complained about the next one. Boomers said it about us. Their parents said it about them. That cycle repeats. What makes Gen X interesting isn't just toughness, it's timing. We grew up in institutional transition. We watched trust erode in real time, media, government, corporations. We were kids when the Cold War ended, young adults when terrorism hit home, mid-career when the financial system cracked. That shapes a worldview. That breeds skepticism. That makes you less reactive and more cautious. And I think that skepticism is part of why Gen X doesn't implode culturally the way other groups do. We've seen too much to panic at every headline. So Daniel, let's zoom this out. Is Gen X's backbone strength just personality, or was it engineered by circumstance? Did we become this way naturally, or did the era we grew up in shape a generation that distrusts systems and operates independently because it learned not to rely on them?
It wasn't engineered in a secret lab somewhere, but it was absolutely shaped by structural transition. Gen X grew up during institutional decline, not collapse, decline. That's different. We weren't raised in blind patriotism like earlier generations, and we weren't raised in algorithmic fragmentation like younger ones. We were raised in the in-between. Think about the timeline. We had 3 television networks and a handful of newspapers telling a mostly unified story. Then cable news exploded. Then talk radio surged. Then the internet cracked the gate open. Then social media blew it off the hinges. Gen X lived through every phase of narrative evolution. We learned early that the official version of events often shifts over time. That builds skepticism, not paranoia, skepticism. And when you grow up watching institutions contradict themselves, from political scandals to corporate collapses to intelligence failures, you internalize a lesson. Trust cautiously. Verify independently. That's not rebellion, that's adaptation. The reason Gen X feels like a backbone generation is because we don't outsource responsibility easily. We came of age when pensions disappeared and loyalty to companies stopped being reciprocated. We saw globalization reshape towns. We saw technology replace jobs. We learned that stability isn't guaranteed. So we built internal stability instead. And here's the key difference. We remember boredom. We remember silence. We remember not being constantly stimulated. That neurological wiring matters. When you aren't raised on constant dopamine spikes, you're less reactive. You can sit with discomfort longer. You don't need instant affirmation. That's not toughness for toughness' sake. It's cognitive endurance. So no, Gen X wasn't engineered to distrust. It was conditioned to adapt. And adaptation creates quiet strength. The question now isn't whether we were shaped by transition. We clearly were. The question is whether we can guide the next transition without becoming cynical gatekeepers of the past.
That's interesting. Cognitive endurance. I actually like that phrase, because when you really think about it, Gen X might be the last group that developed attention span before distraction became default. We learned to sit through things, long classes, long news broadcasts, long stretches of boredom, and boredom forces creativity, it forces self-reflection. But here's where I want to challenge all of us a little bit, because it's easy for this conversation to turn into self-congratulation. We endured more, we adapted better, we're stronger. Every generation believes they were forged in something unique. The difference now is speed. The cultural speed today is faster than anything we experienced growing up. Technology accelerates everything: outrage, success, failure, identity shifts, information cycles. So maybe Gen X feels steadier not because we're superior, but because we were shaped in a slower era. So Skylar, I want your perspective here. When Gen X says we're built different, do you hear resilience or do you hear resistance to change? Are we steady leaders in a chaotic time, or are we clinging to an era that doesn't exist anymore?
I think it's both resilience and resistance. And that's not an insult. It's just human nature. Every generation defends the environment that shaped them because that environment feels like stability. Gen X grew up in a slower, more private, less performative culture. Of course, that feels healthier compared to today's constant exposure. But slower doesn't automatically mean better. It just means different. I don't hear built different as arrogance, but sometimes it can sound like dismissal. Younger generations aren't fragile because they talk about mental health. They're navigating pressures Gen X didn't have: permanent digital records, economic entry barriers that are significantly higher, social comparison at a global scale, and information overload from childhood. That's not softness. That's saturation. Where I actually give Gen X credit is in adaptability. You transitioned from analog to digital without completely losing your identity. That's impressive. But the next step isn't protecting the past. It's mentoring the future. Emotional awareness doesn't erase resilience. It can refine it. Accountability and empathy are not opposites. Structure and support can coexist. If Gen X truly is the backbone right now, then the responsibility isn't to complain about cultural drift. It's to model balance. Show younger generations how to endure pressure without shutting down emotionally. Show them how to question institutions without falling into cynicism. Show them how to build stability without mocking vulnerability. Being built different shouldn't mean being immovable. It should mean being stable enough to evolve.
That's strong. And I think that's where this conversation actually matters. Because if Gen X is the backbone right now, then backbone doesn't mean rigid. It means supportive. It means load-bearing. It means flexible enough to move without collapsing. And maybe that's the real distinction. We weren't raised with constant reinforcement, so we learned to self-stabilize. But that doesn't mean the next generation shouldn't be equipped differently. I don't think this is about superiority. I think it's about context. We were shaped in a slower era. We developed cognitive endurance before digital overstimulation became normal. We learned skepticism from watching institutions shift in real time. We adapted when stability disappeared. That wiring still matters. But Skylar's right about something too. Resilience without evolution turns into stubbornness. And empathy without structure turns into fragility. The balance is the point. Maybe Gen X isn't the loudest generation. Maybe we're not the most analyzed. Maybe we don't trend. But when things wobble, we don't flinch first. We assess, we steady, we carry weight quietly. And maybe being built different isn't about toughness at all. Maybe it's about endurance. All right, let's shift gears.
Before we wrap this up, let me say this. If tonight's episode hit home for you, if you're part of that raised on hose water and independence crowd, we've got something built for you too. Over at the Data Dissonance merch store, we've got gear that speaks to exactly this mindset. Not loud, not flashy, just solid. Hoodies, tees, trucker hats, mugs, and yes, the coffee that fuels half this generation through long workdays and longer responsibilities. The High Lakes Light Roast, bright, sharp, steady. The Rock Creek Medium, balanced, dependable, smooth. And the Bitterroot Dark French Roast, bold, no nonsense, gets the job done. Whole bean or ground. Roasted in the USA. Built like we were, strong finish. If you want to support the show and rep something that actually reflects your mindset, head to data-dissonance.printify.me. Wear it, drink it, represent it. All right, let's land this thing.
You know, the more I think about this conversation, the more I realize it's not really about Gen X at all. It's about responsibility. Every generation inherits something unfinished. Every generation walks into a world that feels unstable in its own way. The difference is how you carry it. Gen X didn't grow up expecting applause. We grew up expecting effort. We didn't grow up thinking the system would protect us. We grew up learning how to navigate it. We weren't raised in a culture that constantly explained our emotions back to us. We were raised in a culture that expected us to manage them, and whether you see that as strength or suppression probably depends on your vantage point. But here's what I do know. When I look around right now, at small business owners grinding through inflation, at parents trying to raise grounded kids in a hyper-digital world, at veterans who transitioned from battlefield to boardroom without missing a step, at people caring for aging parents while still showing up to work every day, I see Gen X everywhere. Not trending, not viral, not demanding recognition, just steady. And maybe that's the quiet power of this generation. We remember what it felt like to be bored, to be alone with our thoughts, to solve problems without broadcasting them. That wiring matters in a world that moves at algorithm speed. It matters when culture feels loud and unstable. It matters when outrage becomes identity. But steadiness isn't the end goal. Guidance is. If we truly are the backbone right now, then the assignment isn't to complain about younger generations or romanticize the past. The assignment is to model balance, to show that you can be tough without being cruel, skeptical without being cynical, independent without being isolated. Every generation gets its test. Ours might be this. Can we carry what we learned without turning it into a wall? Can we evolve without losing the resilience that shaped us? Can we lead quietly without becoming invisible? I don't think Gen X is better. I think we're positioned between analog and digital, positioned between nostalgia and acceleration, positioned between institutions that lost trust and a culture still trying to rebuild it. And maybe being built different simply means being built to bridge. That's our show for tonight. Remember to speak truth, stir thought.
Tonight's episode is brought to you by the Caleb Rourke Thriller Series. Stories built on the same themes we talked about tonight. Resilience, conviction, moral backbone, and what happens when ordinary people are forced to carry extraordinary weight. The Covenant Protocol, the Prophet Directive, and the third installment, Black Echo Rising. These aren't just action thrillers. They're about responsibility, about standing firm when institutions wobble, about individuals who don't wait for someone else to fix what's broken. If you believe character still matters, if you believe strength and conscience can coexist, these books are for you. You can grab them on Amazon, link in the show description. And as always, thank you for supporting independent voices, independent stories, and a show that refuses to just echo noise.